Many of us are thinking about how we can grow herbs and vegetables and beauty and harmony in our gardens and in our lives as we shift and change our worlds. I'm Carla Meske. I'm from spirithealer.com. I'm a shamanic healer for animals and people, and I teach shamanism through my school, Spirit Healer School of Shamanism. My next class is animals, shamanic healing for animals. It's a 12-week intensive course where you learn to communicate with animals using the shamanic journey, and you learn how to heal animals using the shamanic journey, so that not only can you figure out what's wrong, you can do something about it. We have on the call with us today several people who have taken this class. Hello, ladies. And of course, we have Lawrence. And so with no further ado, I am going to share now the screen with Lawrence, and he's going to take you through some herbs that you can grow and how to use them medicinally. Hello, Lawrence.
Hi, everybody. Hope
Good
you're doing well.
you.
Not feeling too shut in. Good to you. Good to be seen. I thought I would talk today kind of on an introductory, maybe intermediate level with a few splashes of advanced information about herbs you can grow for medicine and for fun that every gardener should consider having. So we're going to talk probably about 13 different herbs. Some of these you may already have. Some you may not consider herbs, but they might be in your garden anyway. You might have been thinking them as weeds, which is acceptable. Many weeds are herbs, many herbs are weeds. So I just want to give that plug in before we even get started. And yes, definitely happy Earth Day. This is a great synchronicity to be able to share information with you on the day that we're honoring our Mother Earth, Gaia. And I believe this year's theme for Earth Day is advocating for preventing climate change. So when you grow things, you're definitely doing that, sequestering carbon and all that stuff. So the first herbs I'm going to talk about are ones that you may or may not have. These are herbs out of many, many, many ones that I could have picked that I just wanted to make sure that you consider growing. So we're going to talk about what they are. Hopefully I'm going to master my own technical know-how enough to show you some actual pictures this time. So yay, you don't have to just sit there looking at me and my lovely background. And then we'll just discuss different aspects of them, keep it fairly non-technical, but informative. So the first herb I wanted to start off with is this lovely plant. Everybody see that? Is that coming through?
No, you have to share your screen.
I have to share my screen.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's do that then. Share screen.
Let me make sure I allow you to.
Okay.
Yeah, you can share.
You can share. Okay. Let's see.
You're on your laptop?
Yep.
Okay. Go down to the bottom that says share screen. There's a green button. Click the green button.
Done that, and I'm changing my preferences, and now
choose the window that has the pretty picture in it.
How about that? Still me?
Yeah. I've got it so that you can do this. I've got it set so you have the legality to share. I'm so sorry. And I think we've lost him. Yeah, we've lost the stream from Lawrence. Must be a difficult setup for him today, being in the truck and all. But let me tell you a story. Can he send the pictures to me? Probably. Yeah, that would work. That would totally work. Well, let's see him when he comes back on. But I want to tell you guys a story while we're waiting for Lawrence to come back on because this is pretty amazing. I did a healing session for a cat day before or yesterday. I don't know. This week I did a healing session for a cat. Lawrence, are you back? Coming back.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that.
Okay, you can,
Yeah.
if you want to email me the pictures, I can post them for you if that's easier. But I think you will be able to share.
Okay.
Ah, look
How
at that, Yarrow.
about that? There
Yarrow
we
is
go.
showing.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I'm back, and yeah, what we're looking at here is one of my favorite herbs called yarrow, and its botanical name is Achilles millefolium. So it's named after a famous Greek warrior named Achilles, who was involved with a little activity around a city you may have heard of called Troy. Anyway, you can take a look at that information if you're into mythology and things. But millefolium means thousand leaf, and if you look at the ferny leaves, they're very divided up into leaflets, and that's where it gets its species name, millefolium. This plant grows all over the place, and you may think of it as something that's too general to have in your garden, but it's actually kind of a medicine chest in itself. I have spent um, an hour or more just talking about its many uses, but just in general, we like yarrow because it's a really good external healing agent. You can make an oil with it that's really antimicrobial and has some uh, coagulating properties that'll stop bleeding in a wound. And then when you take it internally, it's really good for the lungs, excellent for breaking fevers. And it also is a tonic for your actual blood. And it helps with cardiovascular circulation. This is a really hardy perennial. So you can grow it no matter where your garden is. The far north, the far south, as long as it gets moisture and is established, it's fairly drought tolerant. If you live in the desert, you might have to water it a little bit more than those of us in wetter places. People often grow this in an old-fashioned lawn mix because you can actually mow it
Mm.
and it'll still come back. So it's really useful that way. And it likes full sun, but it can also tolerate some shade. Um, so the thing about yarrow, if it really likes where you put it, it can start to spread. So you want to make sure you give it enough room to do that. Otherwise, it'll crowd out your other herbs that are maybe a little less robust, shall we say. Uh, so it grows about at least wide by 2, even 4 feet tall. Um, Once it gets established, and you can divide it every few years and share some with your friends who don't have it. Um, the other nice thing about it is it's a pollinator plant, so it definitely attracts butterflies and other insect pollinators, which is a good thing. And I'll just take a look at a close-up of the flowers there. So these are
Mm.
all flowers on their own, or florets, and so this is a compound flower arrangement with yarrow that's called a corymb, which is just a special bouquet, basically, that the plant makes itself. And because it's in the sunflower family, it's got these compound um, flowers like a lot of the sunflower family has. So if you think of a sunflower, it's got all those petals around the outside, or a daisy, which is also in the sunflower family. Those are called ray flowers. And then in the center, which is where the sunflower seeds are made, and that would be the same case with yarrow. The center of the flowers are where the seeds are made. Those are actually a whole nother type of flower, believe it or not, called disc flowers. So you have disc and ray flowers with sunflower family. So technical botany stuff, but interesting stuff to know. And so other things about yarrow, It doesn't really need anything special. Most herbs, that's the nice thing about them in terms of their soil. Um, so you don't have to plump up the soil with a lot of fertilizer. In fact, if you do, it might actually make it a little bit overly aggressive. So average soil is fine, and you can get seeds for this, and you'll end up with a lot of yarrow. You can also get a cutting. You can just get a plant start. That's the easiest way to grow it. And then you've got your yarrow, and you can do just about anything with it. Dry it for tea. You can tincture it. I use it in a formula for regulating my heart. I put in yarrow, a little bit of cayenne, hawthorn, and a cactus extract from Queen of the Night that helps regulate the nervous system. And all those together are just a really wonderful, beneficial heart tonic. So spiritually, again, I could talk about yarrow for a long time. It helps with any kind of psychic attack. So if you're a shamanic person, this is a really good plant to get to know because it will protect you from negative emotions or thoughts. Some people even feel like it helps with radiation that's harmful. And then because it's Achilles, it's a warrior plant. So it's a really good plant for people right now who are on the front lines of this pandemic. It's a supportive plant. It's a plant that helps the walking wounded and the people that are wounded healers. Traditionally, people would keep a sprig of it in their kitchen or in their knife drawer because it's so good at stopping the flow of blood that it has that ability on a spiritual level too. And because it was also called soldier's woundwort, knights errant, the guys would run around and with swords and everything would use yarrow powder, and they would have it on hand whenever they'd get a deep cut, and it would stop arterial blood flow because it's that good. So powerful plant. So that's yarrow. Okay, so we'll move on to this beautiful plant. So if you know anything about plant families, this might look familiar to you. We grow a lot of Lamiaceae or mint family plant members as herbs, and this is definitely one of those. This is actually what Tulsi basil looks like when it's really leafing out, and
Is
so that's
that
the next
it?
herb we're going to talk about is holy basil or Tulsi, and it's a perennial actually, but because it's not frost hardy in climates where the temperature dips below freezing, uh, it doesn't survive the winter. But I was on my walk down by the beach here in Orange County, California, and there was a perennial Tulsi basil that was a hedge. It was about 3 or 4 feet tall, and it had a woody stem to it. It was probably 4 years old. So they will perennialize if you let them. And this is a good container plant, so you can keep your basil alive, provided you give enough light and warmth during the winter months, if you're going to try to keep it going. Otherwise, you can just grow it as an annual and collect it. So we like Tulsi basil. It's one of the herbs I recommended during my herbs to use against the virus lectures because it's an all-purpose adaptogen, and it's herb that helps lower the effects of stress on our system. But it can also help with balancing blood sugar. It's a good supportive herb for respiratory system and digestive benefit. Even regular basil tea is really a nice tea to have just to help settle your stomach after. People don't think of basil that way, but it actually tastes good, and it can help with gas or cramping and things like that. So the spiritual aspects of basil, it comes from India. That's primarily its epicenter of growth. And so there's a lot of traditional associations that go back thousands of years with this plant. It's called holy basil in part because it's intentionally grown around temples and places of offering in India. And it's considered to be an actual representation or even incarnation of one of the consorts, let's say, of Vishnu. And the consort's name is Tulasi or Vrindavani. And so that's part of where Tulsi gets its name, Tulasi, Tulsi. And it's considered a symbol of fidelity, and people take it for enlightenment purposes because it can actually help with your meditation process to cleanse your karma and things like that. So a pretty cool plant, but definitely medicinal, and that's a great use for it. So basil's like more fertile soil, so different than yarrow. So it likes to have a richer soil that's got good drainage, and it likes full sun. Won't be happy if it's shaded. It also doesn't tolerate drought well, so you don't want it to wilt. That means that it's not getting enough water, and it can actually stun its growth. So you never want to let basil, especially holy basil, dry out. And it'll grow about a foot tall, maybe a foot wide. Gets kind of bushy. If you want it to be more shrubby, you can pinch the tops. And if you're not going to collect seed, you can kind of pinch the flowers back to promote more vegetative growth if you're going to collect it for that purpose. And it's a little bit more difficult than regular basil to sprout from seed, but you can try that. You can also, because it's a mint family, take cuttings of another plant and put that in water, and it'll eventually form roots. And of course, the easiest way is just to begin with a start of it from your favorite nursery. So, okay, holy basil. Let's move to number 3. Okay, so I had made my list up of herbs that I was going to present,
Oregano.
and then this guy popped in, and I was like, oh, I love this plant. I need to talk about this plant. And it may not have the most medicinal aspects to it, but there's something about the color yellow with green. It just makes people happy. This is what it looks like in its growth habit. And this is a type of marjoram called golden marjoram. It's also sometimes called golden oregano. It just kind of depends. When I was looking at the research for it, there's a lot of interchangeability between the botanical name for this plant. So I kind of think it's the same thing, even though it's got different varieties. But, horticulture and botany, they kind of pull to each other, but occasionally there's diversions. But the thing is, it's if you're getting golden marjoram, so most people are used to oregano. They don't really think about marjoram. Marjoram is kind of like an elevated oregano in a sense. It's got a citrusy or even lemony aspect to it that gives it a really nice counterbalance to the more pungent side of oregano. Don't get me wrong, I love oregano. I just like adding a marjoram when I want something that's a little bit more light and aromatic in a nice lemony way. And there's a lot of different kinds of oreganos. One of the resources I looked at said there are at least 40 or more different species. And the thing about marjoram and oregano that we're getting benefit from medicinally is an essential oil called carvacrol. And carvacrol is what we associate the smell of oregano or even marjoram with. And it's got medicinal benefits. There's also more of a lighter chemical called saponine hydrate that's associated with marjoram that is less pungent than a carvacrol, but has its own scent and benefits as well. So this is a really nice plant to grow in a rock garden, and it's fairly drought tolerant once established. And it makes kind of a nice mounding habit. It usually doesn't get over a foot tall, but it can kind of spread, as you see in the picture here. And it's just got a really nice appearance and pleasant fragrance. And it's fairly cold tolerant, so it's hardy. Um, and when it blooms, it has these nice kind of pink to purple flower spikes that go up that give it even more character in early summer. Um, and so the spiritual aspects of marjoram and oregano grow wild in the Mediterranean area, and so there's a lot of association with the cultures from that time frame. And there's a lot of positive associations, specifically having to do with love and protection, uh, purification and healing, and even happiness. So Aphrodite, Venus, um, the goddess the Greeks called Artemis, or the Roman goddess Diana, um, goddess of the forest, and even the god Osiris in Egypt. They all had an affinity for marjoram, and marjoram's been used in love potions to bring love and to heal, and it was also worn as part of a traditional herbal crown during weddings back in um, historic times. The Sephardic Jewish healing tradition uses marjoram for healing and also to divine the cause of illness. So wherever people interacted with this plant, they took it under uh, their wings, so to speak, and really use it for a lot of beneficial reasons. So it's just a really positive plant to have around, and even just the smell of it can conjure up really positive associations. So it likes sun, but it can tolerate some shade. Um, the one thing that oreganos don't like is wet feet. So especially during the winter when they're not actively growing, they need to have good drainage. So that's really important. Um, this is one of the plants that probably is more difficult to grow from seed. So you'll want to get cutting from a friend if you have somebody that's growing this, or get a start for it and grow it that way. Okay. So golden marjoram. All right. Now we're going to look at another plant friend. This striking individual is elecampane. And I feel like Ella should be bouting out some jazz tunes for us right now. But this is the full-on sunflower family plant. You can see the blooms here close up. Just a really lovely, very robust, striking plant. This is a plant that does not do well in a container. As you can see, it gets pretty large, 4 feet. I've even seen it up to 6 feet. It's got these very interesting clasping leaves, meaning they wrap around the stem, and they can actually kind of hold water, similar to the way teasels do. So they act as kind of a moisture reservoir for critters and bugs and things. But the thing that we like about elecampane is it's a really good lung herb. And if you're a horse person, the other name for this is horse stock, because this is an excellent plant for chest complaints that horses get sometimes. And it's one of the safe herbs that you can feed your horse people. So it's got horse medicine, and it's got that kind of horse vibe. It's also called elf dock, and where it comes from in the British Isles, so it has association with fairies and things like that. But it's a really good herb for any kind of lung complaint, and like another herb, hopefully I'll get to, called mullein. It can be both an expectorant or a cough suppressant, depending on what your body needs to take from it. So its Latin name is Inula helenium, and it also has a complex carbohydrate or starch in it called inulin, which is got its own beneficial effects all the way through the body, starting the digestive system. And it also is a slow to break down carbohydrate in the body. So it acts as a kind of a slow release energy. Um, other roots have that too. This is an herb that likes moisture, it likes its feet wet. It can tolerate drying out, but if you've got a boggy place in your garden that just is like a swamp and it won't really grow hardly anything, this is probably a good plant to put there and let it do its thing. The wetter it is, the more it likes sun to be able to draw the moisture out, but it will tolerate some shade. And it likes decently fertilized soil. So it doesn't have to be overly, but kind of loamy, clay, but with some sand. Um, and this is an easy plant to grow from seed. Doesn't really do well with cuttings, but you could divide it up and use starts and get it established that way. Okay.
Lawrence, where do you buy your seed? What's your favorite catalog?
Uh, just,
Unfortunately,
special.
the sound is breaking up. Try again.
Oh, okay. Richo Czech has a company called Horizon Herbs.
Horizon Herbs.
Yeah,
Okay.
yep. And they're in Southern Oregon. They've got great um, medicinal varieties of herbs. Richo actually goes all over the world and collects stuff and brings it home and grows it in his garden. So,
Horizon Herbs. All right.
yep, yep.
Excuse me, I'm going to get a notebook.
Oh, there you go.
I think they changed their name to Strictly Medicinals.
Strictly medicinal. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is them too. Correct. Thanks for that. Yeah. Okay. This is our next star quality plant to look at. And this is called the toothache plant or the toothache herb. I commonly call it Spilanthes, which is one of its botanical names. It's also called Acmella. But it's a tropical plant that we can grow in our gardens as an annual. And it also does well in a container. And this is one of the herbs I mentioned also, just like elecampane during my coronavirus, herbs for the coronavirus lecture, because it has really wonderful antimicrobial and immune stimulating properties. It's got this interesting flower, looks kind of like a button, and that's another name for it. Some people call it like pepper buttons or Szechuan buttons. This is, believe it or not, a sunflower family plant. You can see these little blooms there. So it's doing that sunflower thing. And this is primarily what's used are the flower heads, but the whole plant has medicinal properties. And it's, in addition to being a great antimicrobial, it also has this numbing property, even if you work with it a lot on your skin, but especially on your mucous membranes, hence the name toothache plant. When you first try one of these flower heads, it's like an explosion of saliva in your mouth, because its other property is it's a sialagogue or saliva stimulant. And so it's really good for digestion because of that, but it's also really powerful at helping with any kind of dry mouth that might come from stress or certain disorders that people have where for whatever reason they're lacking moisture in their digestive system or in their mouth. So it has this really interesting, very unique name to one of its main alkaloids called spilanthol. And it's an antiseptic alkaloid. There's also an oil called jambu, Jambu oil. If you ever come across that, that's extracted from Spilanthes, and it's used as a flavoring agent in everything from drinks to different kinds of food or chewing gum. And the jambu oil has spilanthol in it, so it has this property of stimulating saliva. People liken this to kind of a tropical version of echinacea, because echinacea, if you've ever tried that, it also has kind of a numbing and much more gentle effect on stimulating the juices in your digestive system to flow. but it's a good analog for that. So growth-wise, you're going to want to put this in a sunny spot, treat it as an annual, and it likes moderately rich soil, likes to stay moist, so don't let it dry out. And again, like I said, you can put it in a container and it'll do fine. Basically grows about a foot tall, a foot wide, kind of sprawls. Not really the most upright grower, but pretty easy to start from seed. You can also do cuttings, and it will grow for you if you just get it as a plant start, obviously. So, okie dokie. So there you go. All right. So these are the herbs that maybe you've heard about, maybe you grow, maybe you don't. Now we're going to talk about herbs that you do have most likely in your garden if you're an herb grower. And this is our friend rosemary. All right. So rosmarinus means dew of the sea. So I found a picture where it was actually looks like it's growing next to the ocean, or at least a body of water. Apparently a botanical PhD candidate got a hold of this plant because they've reclassified it. Botanically, it's now considered a salvia. It used to be rosmarinus, but they've changed that because that's what happens with botany people. Rosemary is a fairly easy plant to grow. It's another mint family plant. It's got square stems and these really pretty purpley blue flowers that are attractive to all sorts of pollinators. Bees love rosemary, and it's an interesting plant to grow just for its character. There's a lot of different cultivars of it. It's so strong that no matter what kind of variety you get, it's going to have some medicinal effects. Some people really don't like rosemary because it's very piney. You know, it's got a lot of menthol in it, as well as pinene and some other essential oils that make it really medicinal, not so great in the culinary field unless you're really good at using it sparingly. I happen to really like it. It's really good with potatoes. So I use it for that reason, or flavoring sauces and things like that. But what I like to do is just take a little bit of the tip on a regular basis when I come across it and just put that in my mouth as kind of a green aid to staying healthy, because rosemary is really good for memory. There's an herb in there, or a chemical in there that they've done studies with that shows an increase in people's memory recall. So it's a good herb for that. It's got natural antioxidant properties. Growth-wise, this is a good herb for containers. It's also a good herb to grow where the soil isn't the best, but it absolutely positively needs drainage. Once it's established, doesn't really need much watering at all. But if it gets soggy during the winter, especially the farther north you go, that will take it out. So you need to give it a really good, well-drained area in the garden, and then just kind of let it do its thing. There's also a ground cover variety of rosemary that's a prostrate rosemary, prostratus. That one isn't used as much medicinally and culinarily as the upright varieties of rosemary, but they're fairly interchangeable. It's got kind of smaller leaves, and obviously it's lower growing. Most people feel like it's really kind of bitter and more like pine sol, I guess, even than the regular rosemary. So it's not, you don't see it often used. But rosemary is one of the important ingredients in something called 5 thieves or 4 thieves, depending on how many thieves there are, I guess, vinegar that was used classically to ward off things like the plague and stuff like that. So a lot of associations with rosemary. So you should always have some of this somewhere close by in your garden. Another a lot of people have, let's move on, is mint. And there are so many varieties of mint. You're bound to find one that you like. And mint is in its own family, the Lamiaceae family, and you can see really one of the characteristics here is the square stems and then the opposite leaves. The other thing to look for are flowers that are two-lipped. So they have two lips to them, bilabiate. Those are all field characteristics for how you can determine if your plant might be in the mint family. Yule Gibbons, who was a famous hobo who hit it big with advertising grape nuts, wrote a bunch of really interesting books, Stalking the One-Eyed Scallop, things like that. Thanks to his wife, who encouraged him to publish all his information he got from traveling the rails all around. He was a big proponent of mints and said, you know, if you find a mint, you don't like it, just keep going. You'll find one a little farther away that appeals to you more, because there's a lot of variability in mints, and plant breeders have taken advantage of that. You can get chocolate mint, basil mint, lemon mint, orange mint, bergamot mint. They all have different aromatic qualities to them. And mints are really easy to grow. They're one of the easiest things to start from cuttings. And some mints even throw seeds, so you can do it that way, but typically it's a vegetative propagation method. Mints tend to do well in shadier environments. They don't always need full sun, but they definitely need moisture, and they don't do well drying out. So if you have a pond or a stream, or you want to grow them in a container, make sure that you give them a lot of moisture, and they'll reward you with copious production of leaves, which is what we're after. So, who else? Dun, da, da, da. Okay, so this is an overlooked plant. It's sage, actually. It does have that kind of fuzzy leaf look. So, but this is Salvia officinalis. It's got these lovely flowers to it, garden sage. And it's another mint family member. Likes full sun, drought tolerant once established. And just like with mint, there are dozens of different varieties of salvias. So you can find one that suits your environment and your particular tastes. The official sage, it's kind of one we associate with turkey or stuffing mixes during Thanksgiving. However, this plant has a tremendous amount of medicinal benefit, and I've had colds coming on that I've arrested by just taking some of the fresh leaves and, again, popping them right in my mouth, and the antimicrobial effects really put the kibosh on whatever was coming up for me. So this is a really good herb to use in a tea. It's very soothing to the mucous membranes because it's astringent, so it kind of shrinks the swelling that happens with inflamed membranes. And it's so good at reducing moisture flow that it's often an ingredient in deodorants and topical preparations where some cooling energy is needed. It's drying. So likes full sun, not too fussy about soil, doesn't like its feet wet, so don't put it in an area where it's got a lot of moisture. And one of the other things about this culinarily that is really wonderful is to take some of the leaves and to fry them up in a like a cast iron skillet just a little bit, crisp them, and gives the plant this nice toasted aspect. And you can sprinkle that on top of whatever you're serving, whether it's a soup, or if you're into dairy, some cheese or rice, any kind of vegetable. And it's just a lovely, lovely way to garnish and use this plant in more creative ways than just, you know, with stuffing situation, which it seems to just be stuck with. So, salvia. Okay, now this is a plant that people love or hate, right? This is cilantro. But if you're a salsa person, if you like Latin cooking, or because it's also called Chinese parsley, if you're into Asian stir fries and things like that, this is a must-have plant for your garden. Very easy to grow from seed. There's varieties that are called slow to bolt, meaning they don't produce seed so quickly, because cilantro, as you can see by its name, it's coriander, right? So the seed that we know and spice as coriander is also vegetatively cilantro. The medicinal aspect of cilantro, since that's kind of what we're focusing on, is really nice because it's a good detoxifier. And this is one of the herbs that I'll put in a smoothie when I'm wanting to do some cleansing, because it has a nice effect on the liver and the detoxification pathways to help you pull out things like heavy metals or other kinds of toxins. So that's a good herb to use for that reason alone. It does have kind of a soapy taste to it for some people, and they've, somehow gotten funding to do testing about this and found that seems to be genetically linked. Like some people just really do not like the taste of cilantro and don't respond to it well, which I think is kind of fascinating. So this plant likes moisture. It likes to be in moderate to average soil in terms of fertility. And it does do well in full sun. So not the best plant to grow in shade, but you can grow it in a container and you'll get good results from it that way. And this is another plant like with basil, where if it starts to bloom, you can, if you're on top of things, you can pinch it back and delay that process so you get more leafy growth out of it for a few extra days or weeks. That is cilantro. Okay, so now we're gonna move into the weeds.
Ooh, cleavers.
Yes.
Well, I found them here in the desert, Lawrence. They're
Oh,
growing.
nice.
They're growing out on the Scottsdale Sonoran Preserve.
Oh.
You can find them in certain places. I brought some home. I chopped them up. I tried to eat them. Mm.
You tried to eat them. Wow.
Well,
How did
I
that go?
thought it didn't
Yeah.
go so well.
Why not, Carla? A little stringy.
You
Yeah.
gotta chew. It's a lot of chewing involved.
Yeah. Well, so this is a really interesting plant. And it's actually in the madder family, which is Rubiaceae, which is what coffee is in. And if you
Mm.
look at these little seed balls that are forming, people will actually get a whole bunch of cleavers once it starts to dry and thresh it in like sheets, walk on it or whatever, and collect the seeds. And you can roast the seeds, grind them up, and they make a coffee substitute. That's if you're really into this plant. But what I like about the plant is that it has a benefit for the lymphatic system. It's a deep-acting, slow-acting nutritive tonic for the lymphatic system. And its other name is lady's bedstraw. There's a type of gallium is the botanical name that was dried and stuffed into a mattress and used that way. It has a nice kind of new mown hay scent to it as it dries from coumarins that are present. And it's one of the few herbs that doesn't really interact with too many things. So it's a pretty safe herb to take, even if you're on other kinds of medications, if you want something that's supportive to your immune system. And if you know anything about the structure of the lymphatic system, so the lymphatic system is basically what houses our immune system. There's a philosophical concept around plants called DOS, or doctrine of signatures, where if you look at a plant and you understand its relationship, you can see things in it that resemble the human body. And so for this plant, people would look at it and you can see there's like a spiral of leaves where the flowers are coming out, and then this long kind of vine-like portion followed by another set. And that's actually what our lymphatic system looks like. We have lymph nodes, which are these little pockets of tissue where the cells of the lymphatic system hang out, some of them. And then in between them, we've got these vessels or lymphangions that link to the next lymph node. And so people saw this, thought, oh, I think this is going to be good for it. And it turns out that it is. So this is still one of those plants that people are annoyed by because it sticks to everything, hence the name cleavers. And so if you've got a dog or a cat or another animal that rows around, it'll come in and it'll be trailing a bunch of this stuff. But the best way to use this is to chop it up while it's still fresh into 1-inch pieces. And if you've got a decent blender, juice it. And you can add aloe juice, you can add vinegar, just plain water. You can make something called a succus, S-U-C-C-U-S. You can add powdered vitamin C to it, something to preserve it for a few days and keep it in the fridge. And you can use this topically or internally. You probably want to test a little bit of it on the inside of your wrist, like you would for temperature if you're going to give formula to a baby, just to see. Some people find it irritating, but it's actually one of the things for burns, sunburns to even more intense burns, because it's what's known as a refrigerant or cooling agent. And it helps bring down inflammation. And we also use that internally to bring down internal inflammation when your immune system is overreacting, or there's something that's inflaming the immune system and you want to moderate it. But it does best when taken as a tonic over time, because it's really benefiting the body from a nutritional standpoint, not so much as a like plant. So you need to take it probably for at least 2 weeks or longer for have an effect, if that's what you're using it for, is for long-term immune system balancing and health. But yes, it's really stringy, and if you don't process it ahead of time, it'll just whirl around like it's going for a ride in your blender, because most blenders can't chop this up. So I have a Vitamix, and this takes care of it. But you can also just crush it up and mix it with some liquid and let it sit for a little bit and then strain it that way. But it's a nice way to use it. So, all right. So, okay. The buzz, bumblebee. This is our friend St. John's wort, or if you're into it, you can also call it St. Joan's wort, like Joan of Arc. And this actually shows up in people's gardens more than they realize, and some folks don't know what it is until it starts to bloom. They're like, "Oh my gosh, that looks so pretty! I better not get rid of all of it." This is Hypericum, Hypericum perforatum, and this is a close-up of the leaf. And what you're looking at are called stoma, and these are the openings that the leaf uses to exchange gases with the outside world. And when you hold the leaf up to the light, you can see these little holes in it, hence the name perforatum. So that's a good identification technique. The other thing that I like to do with people is, you can't see them, but there are all these oil glands in the flowers. You know, what happened to St. John, but he came to a rather untimely end. His head was separated from the rest of his body. And if you take the St. John's wort flower and you crush it, this red hypericin containing oil comes out. Looks like blood. It's really purple dark. And that's where a lot of the benefit, but not all the benefit, comes from with St. John's wort. So St. John's wort is really beneficial for wounds. It's what's called a nervine in the herbal world. So it helps with nerve pain, both topically and internally. This is a really good oil to have around, infused with St. John's wort, in case you get bug bites, or maybe your bumblebee interaction wasn't so nice and it stung you, or you get wounds just from working around the ranch. And salves made from it are also equally good. It can also work for some people who have sciatica. It's a really common use for this plant. Internally, also acts as a painkiller, but it also has this really interesting property for some people in moderating moods. So people take it who have mood disorders like depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder. Seems to work better with episodic depression. So like if you've been feeling rather trapped and you're anxious or you're depressed because you've been housebound for the pandemic, that's probably John's moment. If you've got a chronic condition, you've had, you should definitely try it, but it may or may not be enough. You might have to use something else with St. John's wort, like lemon balm or skullcap or something like that. But one other thing about St. John's wort, in some people it has a tendency to increase their susceptibility to sunlight. And so if you take a lot of this, like, I mean, like heroic doses of St. John's wort tincture or something like that, and you go up to check out the alpine meadow with your buddies, you should definitely wear some extra sunscreen or protection because you might burn easier. And they've seen this happen in animals. If you have overgrazed pasture land, St. John's wort will often be the one thing left because animals don't like it, and then they'll finally start grazing on that. And they've seen, like, you know, those Hereford cows that have kind of brown and white patches on them, where they have the white fur, I guess is what it is, or hair, they'll actually start to get sunburn, and they'll erupt in kind of wounds, I guess you could say, from the sun because of their overindulgence in St. John's wort. So happens to other animals too. It's also called goat weed because goats will eat it, have the same thing. So, but for that to happen with you, you'd have to really take a larger than usual dose of it for most people, but just something to be aware of. Okay. Next one, mullein. Okay, mullein is a biennial. So first year it grows this rosette on the left, and then the second year it sends up this tall spike of flowers, and that gives it its other name, Jacob's candle. People would actually dry these, dip them in animal fat or wax, and burn them as torches, which is, I've never done it. I bet it's pretty striking. But everything from this plant is medicinal, from the root, which is a really good urinary tonic, to the leaves, which are excellent for the lungs, to the flowers, which people make into applications for earaches for kids or even adults. They used to advocate making a mullein flower ear oil, but because of the ability of oil to trap bacteria, what I recommend is, if you're going to use mullein flowers, to make them into a tincture and apply a few drops of that to an earache that you might be experiencing or your kids might have. So you don't have to worry about any bacterial growth showing up. But this is a really common weed in people's gardens, particularly in more desert areas. But I just saw some sneaking into a well-manicured park down here. Hopefully they'll let it alone because it was doing its thing off in a corner. But if you want the leaves, you need to get it in the first year, at the beginning of the second year, and it'll flower and then die off. That's what biennials do in their second year. So you can collect the flowers then. But yeah, this has any kind of lung complaint. This is a good herb to try, from asthma to colds, things like that. People would even smoke the leaves because you get particles in your lung. You just take a few puffs and it'll interrupt a mild to moderate asthma attack in some people. So, and then let's see, like, this is it. Yes. Okay. We're going to actually make it through all of them. Everybody knows what this is, right? This is the dent du lion, teeth of the lion, dandelion. And looks like it's growing right out of rock, which is what it likes to do. Dandelion, you can use all parts of the plant. The flowers, without these little green bracts, make dandelion wine, which a friend of mine made me some. One of the bottles exploded, so I never got a chance to try it. But flowers are edible. The leaves, people will cover them with something to keep out the light, blanch them a little bit so they're a little less bitter. But if you don't mind your bitter greens, these are an excellent spring tonic to get your liver and kidneys going. And then probably the most powerful part of the plant is the root. We talked about elecampane having inulin. Before dandelion flowers, it's got its highest proportion of inulin in the root because it's a storage device for energy, basically. Once the flowers come out, the inulin gets converted into simpler carbohydrates. So if you're picking the root because you want to take advantage of the medicinal properties of inulin, you want to get dandelion before it starts to flower. And the root's really good for your liver, and it'll help detoxify. It's also a diuretic. The French name for this plant is pissenlit, which means wet the bed, which is great. I have to check with my French aunt, see if that's really true, but probably is. So really effective diuretic. And the nice thing about this as a diuretic is it has a lot of minerals in the root and even the leaves. So it's not going to deplete your mineral resources like more prescription diuretics do. You have to be careful about your potassium balance. Nice way to take this plant is to get roots and dry them and then roast them either in your oven or on the stovetop in a skillet until they get a nice kind of shade of brown. You can do that with chicory also, which is a relative of this. Some traditional coffees add chicory to them to mellow them out, but by themselves they're a really nice herbal drink. You can grind up the root and drink it as tea that way, and you'll still get benefit from it, and you'll have this nice kind of toffee, sweet, bitter combination to it that's really delicious. So leaves and dandelions, the bees love them, other critters love them, and they're bringing up subsurface minerals to the soil surface so other plants can use them. So don't spray them away. Give them a place, right? Weeds are wildflowers too, or herbs. So, okay. So I think that was everybody. And we got through all 13, so yay me.
Cool. Thank you, Lawrence. Would you just go ahead and stop sharing screen so we can see you again, and then we'll go to questions.
Let me do that.
Try the top of your page.
I'm looking. So
go ahead and click that green and see if you get anything there. The green band that says you're viewing or you're sharing your screen.
Okay. Doing that, I keep going back. So
try view options, see what happens.
All right.
Let me see. Maybe I can do this.
Bring your share one to the front.
I am gonna record. No, I'm not gonna do that. You can do it. You can figure it out. Do you have a share screen down on your bottom? Ah, we lost him. Huh. Well, while we're at this, I'm going to spotlight video, and there you go. So we're going to have a question and answer period with Lawrence as soon as he comes back. And did you guys like this? Let me see if I can get you unmuted a little bit.
I found it very helpful.
Yeah, pretty amazing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
How do I? Now I'm finding I'm all messed up. There we go. Hey, welcome back, Lawrence. And I'm canceling my spotlight. I'm going to go ahead and for the Facebook friends, you can see everybody's picture up now, or those people who are choosing to share their picture. You can see all of us then. Lawrence, that was just fantastic. Lainey, do you have a question?
Well, I had a couple. The first one was with yarrow. Can it grow in heat here in Phoenix?
Yeah.
Yeah, provided you give it some occasional watering, should be fine. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have one, and I saved it during the winter, so I didn't know what to expect with it getting hot. So
yeah, no, it should be all right. Is it grown in the ground or in a container?
It's in a container.
Okay, yeah, then you can kind of move it around and see where it likes. You know, if you're in a really sunny place, it might actually benefit from some shade, especially, you know, during the heat of the day. But yeah, it should be fine.
Okay.
Hmm. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good luck with her.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good friend to have.
It was almost dead and it came back to life and I was like, oh, yay.
There you go. Yeah, well, it's a pretty tough plant, so I've seen that happen before, where it looks like it's on its way out and then it resurrects itself. So you did
Lawrence,
something right.
can I get a cutting of that? If Lainey gave me a cutting, how would we do that?
Probably the best way is to wait until it gets big enough, and then you can dig it up and kind of divide it.
Okay. I
If
get
you
that.
get roots. And just one thing I didn't mention was the roots are medicinal too. And we mentioned the toothache plant. People take, if they've got a lot of yarrow, they'll take the roots and clean them really well and put them in a jar with maybe an inch of alcohol, like vodka on the bottom, and tip them. And you can chew on those if you've got any.
Okay. Good, thanks. This is so helpful.
There. Yeah.
I have a new service that I got yet another subscription to, which I might be able to have transcribe all of this for us. So I'm going to try that. And we'll see.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We'll see. I'm going to give that a
Okay.
shot.
Cool beans.
I find this so inspiring. Today I'm going to run to the Home Depot, now actually to the Lowe's, and buy the materials to make 2 more big raised beds, one into my morning sun, afternoon shade, and one into my patio.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's my project today. Finish videos and make 2 raised beds and have these things set up to grow all your herbs. Yeah. Any questions for Lawrence? You can unmute yourself or you can raise your hand and I can call on you.
I have a question. Lawrence, I have grown 2 kinds of St. John's wort, and the one that you showed the picture of with the bigger leaf, I thought was St. John's wort, and I tried to make oil from it. It wasn't working. So somebody told me, no, that's not really the right one. So how do you know which St. John's wort is the right one to make the red oil?
So what happened with the oil that you're trying to make?
Nothing really. It just, and actually it was a long time ago, so I don't remember, except I remember the signature was it was supposed to turn red, and that wasn't happening. So then I was told, oh, there's one that is called St. John's wort, but it's not really the medicinal one, had the smaller leaves.
Okay. And it's Penny, is that your name? Is that right? Okay, great. Well, here's the thing. So the hypericin often doesn't turn red unless it's exposed to sunlight when you're making a plant extract. And typically when you make an oil, you want to keep it rather cool, or at least not above room temperature, and in the when I teach people how to make plant oils, we make a dried herb plant oil first, and then in more advanced classes, we'll make a fresh herb oil. You have to be really careful with fresh herbs because of the water content. It can end up growing pretty funky stuff in your oil if you're not really on top of it. But I'm going to diagnose from afar, which is always a dangerous thing to do. But my guess is if the St. John's wort looked like the one that I showed in the picture section, you probably were using the right St. John's wort. And maybe what happened was, because it didn't turn red, you thought it wasn't good. But my guess is it was probably just fine medicine. It doesn't always turn red. And even when you do like offered, which is to put it in the sunlight, it doesn't always turn red anyway. So it doesn't mean that it's bad medicine if it doesn't turn red. the only other thing I can think of is there's a ground cover that's used in horticulture that's a type of St. John's wort, but it's got giant flowers that are probably 4 to 5 inches across. And that's a different kind of hypericum. That one, to my knowledge, doesn't have any medicinal uses. I guess there's another one too that's kind of in between that, but very different looking from the Hypericum perforatum. There's a few other varieties, but that's the one you're most likely to come across. So I would try it again, even if you're not sure. And is this a plant that you have access to?
I just moved, so
You moved.
I moved.
Okay, all right.
Away from those hypericums.
All right. Well, you need to find some new Hypericum friends and see if they'll let you make some medicine. But try it again. And if you when they start to flower or they get in bud, crush them up, and if they make that red stain, you've got good medicine. And then just cut the tops off, like the first 3 or 4 inches, and try it, see what happens. And again, if you're going to make it fresh, don't let it steep for more than a few days, because it'll mold otherwise.
Right. Okay. And so there is a horticultural variety that is not medicinal. Okay.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. But it looks way different. You'll be able to tell. Bigger leaves, bigger flowers, shorter growing. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Okay. Lawrence, you are my hero, and I so completely appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Lawrence is at Giving Tree Farms. Do you want to share screen and show your Facebook and your website, Lawrence, so that people can see it from here, where they can find you to become your customer?
Uh-huh.
Aha.
Where they can find me. Yes. So Giving Tree Farm Herb Company. Let's see. Maybe I can open that up.
Thank you too, Carol. We really appreciate all of you coming. Facebook friends, I don't know how many of you there are, because I can't do the two things at once, but thank you so much for coming. And please share this video with your friends. Share it far and wide on the Facebook. Aha.
Let's see. Yeah, so the name of my business is Giving Tree Farm Herb Company, and you can find me by going to my Facebook page. That's the easiest way to connect.
Okay, here we come. Oh yeah, there you go. See?
Yep.
Giving Tree Farm Herbs. There are a lot of Giving Tree Farms out there, but you want to ends with herbs, and then you've got Lawrence.
Yep. And my contact information is there if you want to call or text me or email me about anything. I do classes, I do herbal products, and I do consultations. So I'm also a shamanic practitioner. That's how Carla and I became friends, was through that medium. So it's great to be a part of what she does, and it was really wonderful to get to spend time with all of you again, and I hope this was helpful and inspiring you to make some positive green things happen in your lives this garden season. So.
We've got 2 on my YouTube channel, Spirit Healer YouTube channel. There are 3 videos of Lawrence. Part 1 of his whole herb for COVID, part 2 of his whole herb for COVID, and then part number 3 video, which is 1 and 2 combined with only the descriptions of the herbs, so that you can just go right through that. Even that's quite long. There's an amazing amount of information that Lawrence has shared with us. It's like a Bible of help for us with the herbs. And Lawrence, we so appreciate you. Thank you.
And likewise. So thank you. Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, everybody. Love, kisses, harmony. We have 2 more pop-ups coming on Friday of this week at this time. Jo Maldonado will be joining me, and she is going to be sharing creating sacred garden spaces. She's an artist of creation of sacred. And then next Wednesday at this time, I'm going to teach shamanic soul gardening, which is a journey work practice to create a garden in non-ordinary reality, where your intention for how you want to grow your life is what the garden is. And then as you tend to that garden, your life becomes. And so there you go. 2 more great pop-ups in our gardening series. So thank you for coming. Hugs and kisses.
Thank you. Awesome class. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us in this class. Please join us again in Circle. We have Journey Circle monthly, many more classes, and lots of fun together at Spirit Healer. See you soon.